Let's jump into today. We're kind of going to ask you some questions as well as give some teaching on this concept of leadership and, really developing people and not just, Courtney's she's ready.
I really need this.
Okay, all right, great. No pressure, Chris. No pressure. I wanted you to know that if this went really, really well today, it's Shannon wrote this and I'm delivering it. If it's not... Who do I pick on? Me. Gio's always a good one. It's too easy. Okay, so we're going to keep diving into this. It has been it's actually not just a constant theme here in church lately. It's been something over the years that, again, people just sometimes really struggle to, not even sometimes, more often than not, struggle to reproduce leaders, to reproduce culture they like, to a lot of pastors, in fact, if they could find another thing to do, they would, except they don't have another way of making money. Mm-hmm. And when you think about, and when I've had moments talking to most pastors and leaders, why they don't like what they do, it's because they don't like who they do it with. Mm-hmm. And they don't like who they do it with because they actually never talk to them or take their role as a shaper and mentor and leader at helping environments be different. And so in some essences, I've also heard around the traps of some of the feedback and teams and what's happening in church. I've watched a lot of people say things like, I don't know that I like leadership. Or I've heard, I think our team just has to like each other more, or unity, or a break, or this, that, and the other. And the truth is this, that what I've found in some of these scenarios is that that wasn't the case. And the reason we don't like it is not because it's not likable, but what you have shaped is not something that you could ever sit in. Mm. And so when you have team members or teams that you don't want to even show up to, it says more about you than them, but a bad leader will blame them. Mm. They'll be like, those people who never listen, those people who never. So I want to ask you as a source of self-reflection as well as tell the group, what is your relationship with leadership? Do you think, like, you as leader, I want you to think of you as a leader, are you comfortable with it? Do you have scriptures you stand on for it? Do you have goals? Do you have ideas that come from the Bible? And this is the pointed one. If you were honest and you were to audit your internal dialogue, how much of your leadership has been set by the leader you don't want to be because of the leader that you've experienced?
Come on.
Yeah.
So a lot of people often be like, I just had when I talk to most people and I'm like, hey, how come you didn't challenge that person? Or why don't you draw close to that person? Or why aren't you very honest? Well, I had a leader that, and it's like, okay, so you're being shaped by someone rather than this is a God task and they're his people. If he's not shaping you, then you're being shaped in the wrong direction. So maybe there's people that feel bold enough or open enough to share, like, what's your relationship? You can share both a positive and a negative that you feel about your leadership. Like, I feel like I feel called to it, but I feel extremely uncomfortable with having to talk to people about growth points. Or I'm too comfort conscious. I want them to feel comfortable. Is there anybody that has any shared points on your relationship or your current journey with leadership as you being the leader?
I mean, something I've recently recognized and something I'm really working on today is that I realized I quickly became a leader that didn't hold the line enough. Mm-hmm. So I would be, just because maybe of experiences I had in the past that was just maybe harder than I would have personally liked. Mm-hmm. I just said it, that wound almost made me go, okay, well, I want all of the people to have this experience, and it was a bad choice on my part. So now I'm having to go back and be like, wait a minute, no, I have to hold the line in these areas, and this is how I can do it. I can hold the line with grace, yet firm. So I'm reteaching myself, I think, and learning from you guys and how you do it, how to really hold the line in a way that brings us forward. Because I was too, maybe not comfort conscious, but experience conscious, maybe, of those under my leadership. wow, I want them to love being a part of this thing with me. And that was a bit of fear of man in there as well in my own personal leadership, where I'm like, holy crap, I gotta keep dismantling this fear of man that is still here. And so I am grateful though to see those things, because
Good.
Yeah, that's a real one, man. I think you want to be celebrated as a leader. You want people to have a good experience.
100%.
I think that it's a very personal thing. And if they don't have a good experience, then Sarah's horrible.
Right.
And can you bear that thought? It's tough, and
It's
a lot of
so
people
real.
won't do anything because of that.
Yeah.
That's a good one. That's a real good one. Experience conscious.
Yeah.
I can go just about the unlearning. So, responsibility is a high strength of mine, and so I realized that in leadership, I take a ton of ownership, and like I always feel like I didn't give them enough, or I could have I want to re-explain. And even when I was a teacher, some of my feedback that I got from my oversights was like, when you're asking the deeper questions and they're not getting there, you tend to answer it for them. And I'm unlearning the way, like some of the, when I see the way I grew up, there's like this I'm unlearning the responsibility might come from, oh, I didn't do enough, with guilt or shame. So I have to dismantle that so that I can, just not get into that managing role versus leading, because I feel like I didn't give enough or do enough, that I have to answer it for them or bring. I'm like, sorry, I should have did this, or I should have did that. So that's for me.
That's true.
Yeah, that's a good one.
For me, one of the things that I, since retreat actually, is just thinking about that manufactured leadership phrase. And something that's hard for me that I'm still learning to reconcile and be okay with, is accepting when the potential you see is not what is in front of you or displayed in front of you. In the short stint that I have with some people that come through college, so I feel like I fail people and that it's my fault. I also have responsibility, and one of the blind spots of responsibility as a strength is that you take psychological ownership of what you're responsible for. So it I don't get upset at failure, for me, if that makes sense. I get upset at failing others. So it's this thing that I'm learning to overcome, because it's did I do everything that I could have done? And you ask these questions over and over, and it's well, hang on, I did. There was discipleship, there was hard conversations, there was good times, you let them into your home, you had an opportunity to do life with them. But my view on it tends to go on the negative side, because I have taken the role of having to manufacture it when that's God's role. So that's something that I'm learning.
Yeah. I think for me, so I'll speak a little bit around my previous church experience under a very manipulative spiritual abuse environment. And I haven't even said that outside of our conversation. So this is a big deal for me. But I remember sitting across my leader and genuinely loving my leader. She was great. But there were aspects of her leadership and her flawed nature that the alarm bells were constantly just going off. And it would be something so profound and great that she would say, but in the same breath, I just felt like there was just something there that just didn't sit well with me. And it was almost like I was being used and manipulated, and it was I see what you're doing, you know what you're doing, but you don't think I know what you're doing. And so when we planted People Church and I stepped into leading, I became a very reluctant leader, and I was I didn't have that self-assurance with leading, because I didn't want people to think of me in that same way that I thought of my leader. Because it's a little twisted and it's a little messy, because they're your leader, you love them, and they're, you see that they have goodness in them, but at the same time, it's almost like this other side of them that is so toxic as well. And so I had to unlearn a lot of that by just like convincing myself and getting God and growing as a leader. And all the convincing part was I'm actually not that person.
Right.
And I almost had to like detach myself because she was mentoring me and discipling me. I had to like convince myself that although she was helping me be formed as a leader, that I was not her.
Yeah.
And I had to gain like a lot of confidence in the fruit of what I was producing. And I noticed that by being a reluctant leader and being disconnected from people, there was more harm done by me being absent than me being in it. And so I had to find my voice. I had to find just my leadership style as well. I'm like, okay, I have to hold the line, and I have to be very firm around just standards or values and just even like excellence, right?
Yeah.
And I have to have a conviction around those things because those things are good and they're going to take us forward, not because they're going to make me look good. And so I just had to like reconcile that. And I don't think that way anymore. It took me years. And I think Chris and I swung to the opposite side of like, swung the pendulum the opposite, because we were like in this environment where it was just very much, and I'm just talking a lot, but I'll end with this. There was like a bit of a kingdom that was forming around two people here. So then we swung it this way, where it was like, no, we don't need help. No, we don't want anyone, coming in our world. We don't want to be perceived in that way. We don't need it. We don't need it. But then by doing it, you realize, no, we can't do this by ourselves. We need help. And we need people. And not only do we need help, but people want to be in our world. And they want to be close. They want proximity. They want to learn from us. So it took me a while to be like, no, people want this. I'm not using people. This is helping us, big picture, but it's also going to help them being close to us. So it took a lot of unlearning and a lot of like convincing myself and to find my self-assurance, because being in an environment that is just so steeped in just like toxic leadership, it was scary to then venture out on your own and figure it out. So, but I thank God that I don't think that way anymore, and I've come out of that. Praise the Lord. So that's just a little bit of my experience.
Yeah, it's good, and man, that in itself is huge, because there's so much to tap into on so many of the things you said. But yeah, I think it ties in very nicely actually to my first point out of the six things that I thought. What are a good mind shift, right? Like, what's a good position shift, heart shift, if you're going to be a good leader? And think of good leadership as something that you don't just arrive at. It's just a constant journey of getting better, right? So the commitment is to better, the commitment is to growth, the commitment is to shift. You just will never be, it's just something you can't arrive at. It's just a good mark to have for leadership. And the first thing I thought of, which was point number 1, was install the right filter.
That's great.
And what I mean by that is that filters, right, are varied. You've got disposable filters in real life. You've got filters with a different mesh grade. You've got filters, if you're talking coffee, that will, they can either filter out a lot. So if you're doing like, like a Chemex, that's like a pretty robust filter, versus like my normal pour over is not as intense. And your filter will determine what comes in, what comes out, all those things. And the idea of a good filter that I think in ministry is not a disposable filter, but a reusable filter. And this is why. A disposable filter allows you to get rid of the things it catches, but you never learn because you can't distinguish what it caught and where it really belongs. Whereas a renewable filter, a reusable filter, you actually take it and you have to clean it out and then put it back.
Yeah.
And there is something powerful about that, because to Audrey's point, we threw the baby out with the bathwater. We thought, well, we had people that maybe we served in ways that were not like good, integrous to the community, to Bible leadership, to what's better for the church. It was very much self-serving, and it was like, okay, well, we just won't go anywhere, because the thing is this: it's basically just throwing out the filter. It's like But you don't stop when you actually have to reuse the filter to pick some things out and go, that doesn't belong here. But if you can't distinguish those nuances, what you do is you throw too much out.
Yes.
And so when I say install the right filter, I think the first thing is do you have a filter that is based on your experience? That's not the right filter. Do you have a filter that's actually placed there because of the way you grew up? Do you have a previous church experience filter? All of those I want you to remove, and I want you to put in this one, what I think is the right filter, is a biblical filter.
That's great.
Start with the right filter. The filter, if you think of yourself as you're in a closed circuit, if you put the right filter in, that is the reality of who you are. You're a closed circuit. You are, you're bringing back up the things of the past and you're reliving them. That's the way we make decisions. This is what I went through, therefore I'm going to make this decision. By adding a biblical filter, it will catch the things in that cycle and cause you to be able to remove them.
Yeah.
You need to have a biblical filter on what it is to be a good leader.
Yeah.
Because I guarantee you that, 48 people online, people in this room, many of you do not want leadership. Some of you would even switch off more to subjects of leadership than others. Some of you are like, man, this is not for me. Hopefully I get something. Or, I really struggle with leadership. I don't want it. And the reason we don't want it is typically because we've got a terrible filter. And we filtered it through our parents that maybe were in ministry and they were abandoned and all these things. But the truth is, hey, sometimes it's not like there's things that you got to filter through.
Yeah.
So the first things that I think is necessary is basically install the right filter. That is, what does the Word of God say on leadership?
Yeah.
Come on.
What does it say? What do we see? How Jesus lead?
Yes,
Yeah.
come on.
What are some of the bad biblical leaders? What did they do? Were they paranoid?
Right.
Yeah, Saul, the first thing he did when he overcame an enemy is he erected a statue in his image.
Yeah.
And one of the first things that he gets told is, why wasn't it enough for you that God was with you?
Yeah.
So you got a guy leading from his insecurities, leading from his background, leading from the fact that he was from a shamed tribe in the people of Israel. He was the least of those, and he was actually from a marriage that his mum was from a people that they shouldn't have got married to, quite possibly because of his height and who he was in the region that he lived in. So you got a guy who had a profession he didn't like, didn't feel adequate, didn't feel qualified, and God's calling wasn't enough of a qualifier.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Come on.
But if you actually get good biblical leadership, you're going to start going, well, the fact that God called me, that is my qualifier. And now I have to learn and I have to get better. But I have to get the right filter. Learn the bad leaders. Learn Joseph and how he led with grace when his brothers showed back up. Learn Pharaoh. Learn these things that actually help you get a better perspective. And then, which leads to number 2, once you have the right filter, make it a habit to clean it.
Yeah.
Come on.
Great.
I don't I think living in my old house and having just, doing the maintenance, man, it's funny how you forget to clean filters.
Yeah.
Because for as long as they're working, I don't have to look at it.
You start sneezing and
Yeah, but all of a sudden the house is just a full-on allergen and it's just like pollen
Dust.
basically living
Dust
with us and dust, and then the shower filter and and there's all sorts of stuff. And the reality is, why don't you look at the filter? I'll tell you right now, I don't even, scariest place from a home, taking care of the home thing, is the shower, the head. All the hair it catches, I just want to vomit. It's the worst thing ever. And I don't go and clean the filter because I don't want to have to confront what the filter caught.
Right. Come on. Wow.
yeah,
Wow.
that'll preach.
Yeah, it really will.
And I think that many of us
A collective cringe.
don't go look at the filter because we don't like what the filter caught.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you don't clean the filter, you'll live from it.
Yeah.
You'll drink from it.
Yeah.
And the goal is that if you and I are going to be responsible, good leaders, and we're actually going to be, and can I just highlight that word? Leadership is a responsibility to steward God's people. You got to steward the flock. And if you are not doing it well, and you don't take that responsibility deep,
Yeah.
then you will embrace your own comfort, and that will perpetuate, and you'll embrace their own comfort. If you can't look at your filter, how could you ever want to address theirs?
Right.
Because you have such an empathetic approach to how horrible it is for you to face you, that you don't want them to have to face them.
Yeah.
So clean the filter regularly. Number 3 is this, which kind of leads to this. Hopefully the filter stops number 3, which is too much of you in this. If all of your statements continue to come from, well, I think, it's been my experience.
Right.
Like, is there too much of you? Like when I'm shaping a preacher, like when I'm helping you guys learn how to preach, I'm very, very careful that you don't preach like me. Like my goal is not to make Jake like me, or to make Gio like me, or to make Sarah like me. Now, some of them might have more of my propensities than others, but the goal is, how do you help them be the best them with what is actually good sound practices? Do you bring too much you? And often you bring too much you because you and your background, your past, your pains, your hurts, your opinions shape your leadership more than God shaping your leadership. If you clean the filter and you have the right filter, it should also filter you out of coming across too strong. And I don't mean strong as in, oh, that was harsh. I mean just too much of you. So Sarah kind of spoke to it, right? Sarah's like, man, I didn't like that experience. But what if Sarah is just a little bit more like susceptible, sensitive to some feedback? Because we all know Sarah, she's the like kindest by nature, really beautiful soul. And that's not a negative, but it is an ingredient.
Yeah, like a factor, yeah.
And what if she then has to lead someone like me, who I was just talking with friends over my birthday. I don't know if you know it was my birthday. It's still not too late. You could celebrate it, whatever. The month's not over. But like we were talking and I was saying like how for years Audrey would do this thing in marriage where she'd be like, I'd be like, man, I'm gonna go get coffee. Don't you want to maybe shower first and we both get in the car and get brunch as well? I was like, that's very specific. And no, actually I did not think that. Bye. I'd go grab coffee and then bring it back. And it was like, I wasn't good at reading in between the lines because I'm not. I'm a black and white person. I give black and white feedback. I take black and white feedback, but I don't take grey. I don't even know that, because I'm just saying, if you didn't say what you mean, I guess you don't. I don't know.
Mean what you say.
Just I don't know. It just doesn't even. So what if if Sarah's trying to lead me out of her? There's too much of her in her leadership of me, and she's trying to protect me, but I actually don't learn unless she just is upfront with me. She's going to have someone that she can't lead, and it would seem so innocent and fine, but there was just too much of Sarah in this.
Yeah, come on.
It's good.
So good.
It's great.
The other thing is this: a filter isn't a complete holdback, which means some of Sarah needs to be there.
Yes.
Otherwise, God wouldn't have chosen Sarah to lead.
Yeah.
So the best way to navigate that is how much of you lines up with who God is.
Come on, that's good.
The elements of you that are elements of God that He has instilled in you, lead from them. Lead from good sound constructs. But make sure not too much of you comes through, because if it's always your opinions and your experience, if in fact you come to, if you come to conclusions when you hear someone based on what you already think on the subject, I think there's just a good recipe or understanding that you might be too present in this. Number 4, I think that helps with this idea of leading people is know that enablers are inhibitors. I think I would ask the question, if you're a leader that enables too much. And what I mean by enables is, do you enable people's lack of growth because you will not actually challenge it, but rather you support it? Or you are passive. I didn't support it, but you also haven't said anything about it. And even though we've been doing this staffy, I had a conversation with 3 people last week, or the week before last, and all of them were just, again, the same old thing. But did you tell them what you needed to tell them? Yeah, I did tell them. I go, okay, well, tell me how you told them. Like, well, I kind of said it in, I'll say you didn't say it. I know you didn't say it because you said, I kind of said it.
Yeah.
If you have to say, I kind of said it, or I said it this way, you have to be clear. If you're not clear, you're enabling it, and it's an inhibitor to them. You got to know the difference. Are you enabling environments? And another enabler is this: not good work ethic doesn't always make good leadership. Yes, you could be the one that rolls your hands up. So I made a decision in the earliest days of People Church, earliest days, that was very counter a lot of my peers and a lot of people, and I had to go against it because it was counter what Audrey's experience just she shared was, but I chose to never set up and pack down. And I chose on purpose. And the reason I chose on purpose was not because I'm afraid of the work, because to be honest, there was moments that I still had to, I think we spent the first 4 Valentine's days coming in and actually ended up setting up, Vision Sunday and just staining desks and cancelling dinner plans. And okay, we're staining desks today. It's not because I don't like getting my hands dirty. It's not because I'm above it. It was because I actually understood this. If I pick up everything in this church, nobody else will.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
And you've got the past, like Olds and I moved to the Gold Coast from Sydney, and Gold Coast in Australia is very like beachy backwards a bit, It's probably better now, but it wasn't then. And we go to this drive-through place because it looked like a new franchise, and I just love food. So I was like, oh, sick, new burger franchise, let's go. So I go in, and the guy at the front door, he's like, hey, can I take your order? So I give him my order, and then go to the money window, the payment window, and all of a sudden there's no one there. Guy comes up, same guy that took my order is there. And he's like, I'll take, but he didn't even play it off as if I'm here as well. He was like, he took on a new character. He was like, that'll be $4.99. I was like, you just told me that. And then I go around the next window, no one's there. He comes running with my order. He went all 3 windows. And I was like, you might as well just be honest and say you don't have them and just serve me all from the one window. But how many of us in leadership do that? Yeah. Pastors often play every role and no one plays anything, because here's the thing, when you look like you've got it covered, people don't think there's anything that they need to cover.
Right.
And so good work ethic doesn't always make good leadership.
Yeah.
And if you're going to embrace good leadership, you got to understand that leadership is being okay with losses.
Yeah.
And you've got to also understand that losses, if you won't let something fall in your ministry, you definitely won't let people fall. And what that means is that basically, point number 5 for me is catching them before they fall. And I put a little tagline to it, and I just said, the sting is their strength. If you keep trying to catch people before they fall, they've never actually ever had a problem.
What was the sting part?
The sting is their strength.
No, but how did you word it?
The sting is their strength.
You said something.
No, I said catching them before they fall, and the tagline was the sting is their strength. This is like, what I mean by that is this. If you won't give someone feedback, sit someone down, step them aside, stop them from preaching or doing any of those things, by not giving them the sting, you've actually never given them the lesson.
Yeah.
And some of us in this room, the sting is as simple as honest feedback. And you don't give honest feedback, and so they never learn. And because you don't give honest feedback, not only because you don't want to hurt them, but you don't want to lose them. Which means, do you lead to keep people, or do you lead to move people? I think that catching them before they fall is one of the worst things you could do. I think Ords does this quite well. I think Ords will let people run with an idea sometimes, as long as it's not super crazy and too much collateral. And Ords will let them run with it, and then they come back and go, well, yeah, okay, I should have taken your advice on that. The sting honestly helps. We had an actual mantra in People Church for 3 years of our beginning, and it was this: we never cancel anything. And man, it hurt us, but it didn't. It hurt us in the moments, and it never hurt us in the future. And it was this: if you keep, let's say I've got an event, for July 30th, and then I discover that we're not ready. And I go, okay, let's just move it to June 15th. And then we're still not ready. And then I move it to, we can't go backwards, August 15th. And then from August 15th, I move it to September 1st. All I've done is taught you that there is no responsibility or accountability for not getting your job done.
Right.
But when Maddie has to show up to an event and has none of the things ready, and she's got to sit through it, and her team has to sit through it, that becomes a lesson you'll never forget. So I would rather fail once with a lesson than fail forever with enablement.
That's good.
Come on.
Yeah.
So catching them before they fall honestly hurts us more than anything. The sting is their strength and ours. Number 6 is clarity is not cutting, it's necessary. Clarity is not cutting, it's necessary. I think so often we pull back from being super clear on our feedback because we're afraid that it might cut them. but clarity is not cutting. It's actually the best thing for people. I want to ask you, as you sit across from people, how clear are you on the things that need to shift? Please don't do hint-based leadership. I call it hint-based leadership because you say things like, have you ever thought of, did you ever wonder if, hey, so maybe next time we could do a bit more of. I hate that statement. Hey, maybe next time we could do a bit more of. You know why I hate it? Because you never said we shouldn't do any of what you did. So they're like, oh, maybe a bit more? Maybe it's a bit more? Still some of what you did? Be clear. I love that you did this. This, though, needs to shift. Hey, I've watched, like, those things matter. Clarity is so important. And also, please do not refrain from bringing clarity to the intangibles. Meaning, if 70% of body language is nonverbal, that is 70% of the actual place you have to correct in a person.
Yes, come on.
But you usually don't, because they never said it. And do we correct an eye roll? Do we correct an attitude? Do we correct the ethereal? Absolutely. Absolutely, because everybody feels it. Everybody sees it.
Right.
You know someone's leaving your team before they leave your team. You know someone's upset with you before they say they're upset with you. You know if you're married that there's something wrong before any argument exists. No, most communication is non-verbal. And if you don't speak to the non-verbals, you will actually constantly be fronted with a team that you cannot lead, cannot grow, and aren't happy with. You've got to talk to the things that others won't talk to. But talk to them with, I always say this, hey, I could be wrong, but this is what I keep seeing.
Come on. Yes, so good. So good.
Clarity is not cutting, it's necessary, it is important, it is something. I would set you a challenge. Let's see how clear you can be. And by being clear, I want you to say this. Think these two things. Ask them to communicate back to you what you communicated to them. And then all I want you to do is ask yourself, is this honestly what I think?
Yeah.
What they just said to me, is that honestly what I think? If you do it in love, if you do it with respect and honor, all things should be on the table to be communicated.
That's good.
Number 7 and last is simply this: you can't lead to keep people. Do you lead to keep people versus leading to move people? I know that sounds so cliched and simple, but to be honest, I would say from the amount of conversations I have with Christian leaders, pastors, conferences I go to, messages that they speak about, even the things that they say, like they don't want to show up to the weekend after Easter because no one else is there, that one of the worst things, you know that there are more pastors in therapy because one family left their church? Just one family will send them into a tailspin. Fully. I mean, this is constant. One person leaves a team and people are like, I hate ministry, I never want to do this again. My question is this: are you leading to keep people or leading to move people? If you're leading to keep people, they're leading you. Because you're going to have to tailor to everything that they want and everything that they are. And if you lead to keep people, you're keeping them. You're keeping them from growing. You're keeping them from honesty. You're keeping them from a lot of things. Now, I'm not saying that we lead recklessly, but we also got to understand those dynamics. If you lead with an open hand, you have them for the time you have them. You got to speak honestly. I think as well, if above all things, in every one of these points, you're constantly be the biggest student in the room, even if they call you teacher.
Come on, yes.
Be the biggest student in the room, even if they call you teacher. Go into everything with that. Help me understand this, because I'm hoping it's not what I think it is.
Come on.
Yeah.
Maybe you're coming from some other place, but doesn't mean you refrain from what you have to say.
That's good. Yeah.
But I think this, if you keep leading to keep people, you'll never lead anybody. And that goes for a platform through to a boardroom. If you're leading to keep people, that's not going to ever be integrity. You know why? It is simply so, there's a vested interest. Like, for example, none of our overseers have a retainer to be our overseers. You know what I mean? We don't pay them a retainer, because if they did get a retainer, we honor them when they come. If they preach, we'll honor them. We want to look after them in their hotels and things of that nature. But we don't put them on some kind of crazy thing. And even the honorariums we give them are very similar to they're the same as every other speaker that gets it. Now, if they had something to vest and they came every year and we made up X amount of their wage, what incentive would they have to correct me and Audrey?
Right.
Come on.
That's good.
Now, if you just are thrilled by them sitting in seats, and what matters to you is that they sit in seats or on teams that you lead, what incentive do you have to correct them? And it's been my experience that God always brings the next person.
Yeah.
If you're integrous to how God wants you to lead people, no one is indispensable.
Yeah.
God will bring someone else. Even in moments where you never think, man, like where would this niche person be? God will bring someone else.
Come on.
So please understand, and this tied into 2 weeks ago, was this is sacrificial.
Yeah.
And it's you sacrificing needing to be loved and liked. Now, all of this to say, this doesn't mean you're a horrible leader, a rude leader, an angry leader. That's not what we're talking about. But the truth is this, there are going to be moments that you have to embrace the purpose of your title, and that is to move people and lead people. And moving someone to God, moving them closer to proximity to the Holy Spirit, moving them to growth, moving them to all those things, they matter. In the weeks to come, we'll talk about, are you created, designed to be more of a caregiver or a coach?
That's great.
Are you the person that will mend them back to health, or are you the personal trainer that will push them to growth? Because the personal trainer doesn't make a great mender. You know what I mean? They're not the same person. They always want one more. You know what I mean? But then you got the person that's really, really good at just taking care. And then you've got people that have different nuances and scales in between that massive journey that is getting someone to their best day. But we want to talk about it, because we also think, as much as this is a reality, you also need to play in position.
Yes.
And the goal is not to be the coach if you were made to be the caregiver.
That's good.
But even the caregivers have a healthy understanding on what is good for you versus good to you.
Yeah.
I know this is going to sting, but this is what's happening. We're cleaning out that wound. I know this is going to hurt, but we got to get this done. And I've found that quite often every time a good caregiver cares about your well-being, not about basically how much you like them. You might hate that they put way too much detergent in there, or whatever hydrogen peroxide, whatever they put in there. You might hate they were too rough, but if they weren't and there was something left behind, you'd have an infection.
Yeah. Come on.
So even the caregiver has to marry this dynamic. But we'll talk about it. These are my 7 points for today that I just think hopefully will help you. We've got 10 minutes. We'll use 5 of them. We'll give a 5-minute mark, early mark. But is this something that sparks questions for you? Does it spark emotions for you? Are you there yet? Is this easy for you? Where are you at? What are some thoughts, questions?
I have a question. Okay, so you said leading to move people versus leading to keep people. How do you navigate when you are actively moving somebody, so you're keeping them, but you need to maybe release them because so in the past I've navigated moving people through pastoring mostly, because I think.
Are you talking moving them in or out?
Developing people, developing a leader that you have on your team, so you keep them because you see the potential and there is movement, but the process is taking so long because you're developing them from literally the ground up, and the pace is kind of.
Potential's overrated. It's not guaranteed. It'll never go further than work ethic. And you can choose on potential, but you got to keep on production. Because at the end of the day, potential is nothing more. There's a lot of abusive, terrible relationships that are based on potential. He could love me. She could be the one. She could stop cheating. Potentially she could. And potentially they might. And potentially they might take it serious one day. Potentially. But at the end of the day, potential has a very short lifespan, and production is what you should be looking at.
It's good.
That's great.
That's great.
Good point.
Yeah. Thing.
I guess it would
I have
that
a
be,
question. Sorry, somebody in there had a question. I could wait.
it was just like, would that be one of the indicators that you've used in the past, like for navigating with someone like your season's not up, if they say they want to leave, or versus like you let them move on? Is that something?
Honestly, for me, my first and foremost is spiritually. What do I feel spiritually? Like if I sit in front of you and I can't see a future for you, I know that your time with me is done. But then even when you see a future for people, you have to lead with an open hand. And sometimes, my key is like, it's up to them if they're going to stay. And then there's moments where people are willing to stay, but you've got to move them on or move them to the side. And it goes back to their sting is their strength. And sometimes the greatest catalyst to potential becoming reality is actually sitting someone out and aside because they're not producing. Because a lot of people will feel and often feel like there is no difference between potential and reality. So they'll think, well, I am going to be, or I am pretty good, but you could be, but you're not. And so I think sometimes it's like just navigating that and just making decisions. And ultimately it's like, okay, do they want it? And, there's just always a lifespan. And sometimes it's different. Like I'll hear from the Holy Spirit. Yeah. There's some people I'll keep longer than others, and it's case by case. Nothing is... I'll say one of the worst things you can do in leadership, just as by and large, it's kind of like very similar to a framework as a youth leader. You should never say, or if in any pastoral care situation, if someone says, I got to tell you something, you got to promise me not to tell anyone, the worst thing you could say is okay. You always have to give it a caveat of like, well, as long as it's not illegal, as long as no one's at harm or in threat, I will make sure that, yes, I can do that. And one of the same things is this: never give. We want you to be here for 6 months before you do. I want you to be here 6 months before you serve. I want you to be here 6 months before you're on the worship team. Look, we know this. Time doesn't change people.
Right.
Work changes people.
Right.
God changes people. People could sit for 6 months and be the same person, if not worse than what they were when you first met them. So if all you do is put timelines that don't actually look for production.
That's very good.
I have a question on the board.
What's the balance of holding the line and loving people? In my opinion, holding the line is loving people. Hard truths equal love thoughts. Yeah, 100%. Look, not every time you love people, they feel loved. Because love is both tough, love is difficult, and we all know that if you've got infants, right? I'm the worst dad in the world because I make them go to bed early. I'm the worst dad in the world maybe because I didn't give candy, or I'm the worst dad in the world because I didn't let them dance in the fire. And it's like, actually, no, you'll burn. And you hate me now, and I'm so mean and horrible because you just don't see it. But that's okay. True love is actually something that pours out and doesn't seek to receive. And so in that concept, right, I'm happy to give you what's best for you, even though you won't think the best of me.
That's good.
Yeah, I have a quick question. Well, maybe hopefully it's quick. So I was just reading like Matthew the other day, and in Matthew like 17, where the disciples couldn't free the boy from the demon, and then Jesus tells them like, hey, you guys couldn't do it, essentially because like they didn't have enough faith. And I guess like I think this is really awesome. This is great because I feel like my filter in like the time that I've been at church has just been out of fear. And I think same thing with like Pastor Audrey, like she said, like I had a leader growing up who just, it just wasn't good. And I think that for me was just like, I would rather not do that to people, so I'll just like stray away. But when I was like reading that, I just like really stuck that at the last one last night you had talked about this, Pastor Chris, a little bit. But essentially, like, what would you say, like, have you seen this, like, as, in your time as pastor, like, people who have been, like, I'm just struggling with, like, is it the sting that people need to go through, or is it that, like, they don't have, like, the faith, sometimes to do things, like, how do you decipher, like, letting someone just go through the sting of the lesson? Or is it because like they just didn't have the faith, to like do it? Like, have you seen that like today? I don't know. I feel like even I myself struggle with that.
I think they go hand in hand. They do, but there's more than one lesson being taught in a classroom at any time. So it's both that. I think it's both the sting, and they need more faith in moments, and you need more faith. And the essence is this: do they need to feel the sting, or do they need to learn the lesson, or do they need to just do it different? Well, the sting is the greatest teacher. It's the reality of everything we do. In fact, it's why we intrinsically have fear, so that we might not jump over the cliff, because we have an understanding. It's the reason that as we're little, thank God that we trip over as we're learning to walk, so that we don't run headfirst into things that we couldn't do. It's just the reality of life. And I think that it's just absolutely important. And I think this, as a leader, my revelation is this, and this is a great way to both finish our time and maybe this question, is years and years ago, I felt one Sunday that I should remove a dude from the worship team, And I went and I just felt bad because it was just before service. And I was like, oh, how embarrassing. This guy's going to have to walk off stage right now. Like, that's really, really rough. And so I just went up and I asked him, hey, is there anything that you need to tell me? Like, I've just kind of felt like God prompted that you shouldn't be on this stage. He goes, no, I'm good. I was like, oh, okay. Man, that next service, it was like a vacuum came and sucked the presence of God out of there. And I remember sweating, just feeling like the whole service, like, I will never do that again. Next Sunday rolls around and I feel the same thing. And I go up to him and I say, hey, I'll go up to him and I was like, well, I'll never let it happen again, but man, God, I feel bad. And God just said this, your job as pastor and leader is not to limit the blows, but to actually walk them through the lows. So life is going to deal them blows. There's going to be blows and repercussions to their decisions. You're not there to stand as a barrier between those, but you are there to love them on their worst day. Some pastors don't get this balance point right. They either try to protect them from their consequence, or when they suffer a consequence, they just don't even talk to them. It was like, no, I'm happy to love you through your worst day, but I can't shield you from it. And so I went up there and I said to him, hey, I feel the same thing again. And he said, no, I'm good. I go, well, then you're going to have to explain to me why the Holy Spirit won't leave me alone and why I still feel this. And then he admitted to a slew of things, completely immoral, sleeping with a married woman, doing all sorts of things. And I was like, okay, well, you got to sit down. And that service didn't have the talent, but it did have the presence again.
Wow.
And so I just think when it comes to us as leaders, that was a moment where I had to walk down what was very embarrassing for this person and realize that it wasn't my doing. I didn't cause it. I didn't choose to do that. I had to hold a line.
Yes.
I had to love the congregation more than I loved that guy's ego. And I needed to actually make a decision to bring him there. And I think then I still loved him through it. In fact, years later, we ended up having lunch together and he just thanked me for things and I got an update on his life. And it actually led to change in him.
Come on.
As far as that point in that moment, I don't know if it's still there, but it did work. If I would have limited his lesson of the sting, he never would have gained and learned the faith. And if everything is a faith issue because you don't trust God, well, what better place to trust God than, in the desert?
It's good.
That's awesome. Thank you, Pastor.
Well, guys, that is Staffy. Appreciate you all. Have a great day. Have a great week. And we will see you on Sunday.